man, we have this and of course I'm assuming most people have seen or are familiar with this whole fight card that happened over the weekend. Of course, the main event was Mike Tyson versus what's his name, Roy Jones Jr. And of course on the undercard we had Logan Paul, sorry, Jake Paul facing Nate Robinson. Nate Robinson, I'm not really familiar with. I'm assuming he's like an ex basketball player, NBA player. Judging by some of the memes and the banter that was coming out from some of his ex colleagues and professionals. I'm assuming they'll say ex as well. And he got knocked out pretty bad, man. Like it didn't really end well for my guy, or my guy for the guy Nate Robinson. And I guess we shouldn't be that surprised, right? Considering that I think from what I've learned during lockdown, I've learned a few things, right? I've learned that people seem to argue a lot on Twitter, right? There's a lot of toxic sort of communication that seems to occur on Twitter. No one's really civil or want to have interesting conversations. Everyone's sort of really just trying to go for it on Twitter and kind of fuck each other over by saying the most meanest of things. And the other thing I've also learned watching a lot of MMA over the lockdown period is that there are definitely levels to fighting, right? You see one person fighting and they're absolutely dominating their opponent, doing what they want with them, bending to them to their will, sort of imposing their will on them in the ring or in the octagon. And and the first thing that you kind of understand from it is the levels. And then again, you see that person facing somebody else and they get completely ragdolled, right? So you're seeing that, wow, if this person beat that guy and that guy's really good, but then he faces this guy and he just looks like an absolute bum, that must mean there's levels to this shit. So when I saw this being announced and I saw like a former, dunk winner facing against Jake Paul, who I guess is a YouTuber, but he has a lot of experience, being in the ring, fighting and putting his body on the line and all this sort of stuff against somebody that hasn't done it ever. It was always going to be a recipe for disaster. And again, this is coming from my own very limited experience fighting, right? I did a little Groupon Muay Thai class, right, back in the day, maybe a couple of years ago. Again, being a fan of MMA, being a fan of martial arts and whatever. And the first thing that I noticed quite quickly was like how it sort of the parallels between fighting and football, like sports I play, right? Like I've been playing football for the majority of my life, right? For the sport I've played the most, right? This replay that I'm watching him just running at forward to flipping Jake Paul. I played football for the longest period of time, so I would assume even my kind of low level of playing football is probably better than somebody that just starts playing football now at the age of, I don't know, 25, right? They're never going to be as good as me, right? Because I've got my base, right? And I'd assume fighting is the same, but for some reason I don't know why it is. Maybe because it's a life and death thing, everyone seems to have this really warped way of looking at it, where they always think that they have the ability to beat someone who can fight just because they have hands and feet. Like that seems to be really odd, isn't it? Because again, like I mentioned, if you've played football, like if you're 25 and you play football from the ages of 2 until 23 even, and then somebody tries to start playing football at 21 years old, they're never ever going to be as good as you, even if you're not that good, because you've just been doing it longer. But for some reason we think just because you just start training 6 months ago, that this guy must have been even less than that, that you're suddenly now going to beat somebody up who's been fighting in some way, shape or form all their life, right? Because I think Jake Paul's got experience in wrestling, of course. So his brother, they've won a lot of championships in their area and all that good stuff. So for him to suggest and think that he's going to suddenly get to a level where he can compete with somebody like that is just insane. And what we saw with this fight, which I'm kind of seeing on the background highlights here watching, was that this Nate Robinson guy was completely disorientated the once he got hit. He had never been hit before, and I remember maybe Khabib Nurmagomedov said it once when I think he was talking to the Nelk boys, right? I think he said it like that, where I think they were kind of bantering and asking him, "Oh, do you want to beat this guy?" He's like, "How old are you?" Right? The first thing he asks is age, and the reason why he was asking that is because from what I've read between the lines, there's only a certain amount of skills that you can learn the older you get, right? It is limited, of course, to your age and your ability to remember the skills, but it's more so about your ability to kind of withstand damage. That sort of flinching motion thing that you do when you're older is very difficult to, it's easier to kind of get that out of you and to allow you to kind of be a bit fearless. It's sort of like, I kind of equate it maybe to like being able to do tricks downstairs on a skateboard, right? It's probably easier if you start doing it when you're younger because you've got less fear at that age. But to try and, to try and do a big flip down a 25 set stairs. It's just going to be difficult at the age of 29. It's just, you can probably do it physically because it's nothing's impossible, right? But in terms of being easier to do, it's probably easier to do when you're younger. So I'd assume that's what happened to Nate Robinson. He just hasn't been hit enough in the head or punched in the body or kind of tied up when you're kind of in the clinch. He just hasn't done enough of that day to day for it to make sense and for him to know what to do under those bright lights. Because, you know, you hear Mayweather say it all the time, oh, you know, under these bright lights, everything changes, right? Imagine the fighters that kind of fight against Floyd Mayweather, right? They're already seasoned professionals, like really, really top level fighters. And even those guys suffer when they get under the bright lights and they have all the skills. And imagine if you're Nate, you don't have the skills, you fight against somebody and instantly if you haven't been, like most people, have you been in a fight? I've been in a couple of street fights, right? Maybe a couple that I've lost, whatever. But for the most part, when you're involved in a street fight, you know pretty quickly when you're fighting somebody whether or not you're gonna win or not. You know very quickly, oh shit, this guy's strong, this guy knows how to fight. You clock it quite soon, right? Just from what they do, how they move, you're like, oh shit, I'm gonna be in for a long day. So to be Nate Robinson and to have that happen when you're fighting in this ring against someone else on this sort of platform, knowing it's being streamed around the world and many people are watching you, it's just, I feel really bad for him, especially considering how the knockout occurred. Now again, in terms of skill level, he shouldn't have been in that ring. He was leading with his chin. He was not, everything he learned in camp went out the window. All those drills that he did were completely of no use, especially when you're in the ring. As soon as you get hit in the head, that Mike Tyson quote, right? Everyone knows what to do. Everyone's got an answer or something until you get punched in the face, right? That is definitely true, and you saw it here in this replay here I'm watching on the on my screen. He sort of leads in, literally, which is similar to what you'd see in a street fight. You'd see this quite often in the street fight. You see somebody sort of like leading in with their face, with their arms down below, hoping to sort of swing upwards. But when you're a fighter, you sort of obviously move, I guess, with your hips and with your feet, and you're kind of pivoting backwards. And that's essentially what Jake Paul does. Nothing that really too advanced. He kind of leans back and just boom, overhand right, which is kind of the classic sort of, you know, knockout button, right, to back of the head, back of the ear. It sort of complete lights out, disorientates you a bit, and legitimately, look, he lost everything. You know, his body went a bit limp. He didn't just fall down on the floor for tiredness. He went a bit limp. Like as soon as he got hit down a button, his body kind of went a bit limp and he fell down the ground already. That's the first sort of knockdown. And then of course he gets another one here later on, but he's just not a good enough fighter to be fighting somebody of Jake Paul's level in a boxing ring. It just doesn't make any sense. He gets tied up a few times, and then of course he suffers a really, really embarrassing knockout. Because again, mostly because of his lack of skill, not because he got knocked out. Anyone can get knocked out. I think the fact that he got in the ring should be commended, but the fact that he gets in the ring and then gets knocked out with a punch that you could have probably seen coming if you had some level of training, and also a punch that he could have avoided if he didn't go in the way that he went in, right? Boom, he kind of walks into the punch effectively the same way he did in the first round. Hands down, overhand right again to the back of the head, and that way it's completely lights out. No, it's twice, one more actually. This is not even the one. He gets this another, so he gets knocked out. He gets knocked down 3 times with the same punch, basically, right? Jake Paul kind of bops his head, and again, I imagine if you'd find somebody better, they'd always notice that Jake Paul does that thing where he sort of closes his eye and launches with the overhand right, and you'd obviously be waiting with an uppercut or something, I would assume. So he doesn't have that ability to sort of recalibrate, and of course by then he's completely gone, doesn't know what he's doing. And then here comes a poster card moment, and he does it again the third time. Actually, it's even worse watching this back, man. At the time it was bad, but it's even worse watching this back. And then again leads him with his chin, and then Jake Paul doesn't even move that well. Like look where his feet are, Jake Paul, right? Where his hips are in general, right? It's not even that good of a punch, like, and he just completely flatlines a guy, man. Just eats the entire canvas. Bang, poster card moment, bum in the air, and that spawns the meme, the Nate Robinson challenge. So that's all well and good, you know the deal with that one. And again, I don't really know why everyone's sort of like dancing on his grave, so to speak, when it comes to being Nate Robinson. Maybe because he's not that well regarded outside of basketball, maybe because he said some really wild stuff when he was preparing for the fight, but it got so bad that even the baby supposedly, this is supposedly it actually happened, hangs out with Jake Paul's article here, hangs out with Jake Paul and does a Nate Robinson challenge, which is everyone's been doing this thing where they essentially lie prone on the floor and that's the Nate Robinson challenge, and the baby even done it, right, which is incredibly embarrassing. And then of course you've got this video here from Twitter where somebody uploaded loads of images of people doing it all across Instagram and taking part in this Nate Robinson challenge, lying on the floor, lying on the floor face down. It's just, it's sad, man. Again, like, I understand, man, like, you know, getting in the ring is really scary. Trust me, I've done a month's worth of oops, I've done a month's worth of Groupon classes, right? It's a scary thing getting in the ring, especially with somebody who actually knows how to fight. It's all well and good having the adrenaline to do it on the street and bumping into somebody in a supermarket and feeling like a bad boy, but to get in a ring or to have a sparring match with anybody with any kind of skill takes a lot of balls. Yes, he got a lot of money. I think he got like $500,000 or something, right? $500,000 to do the fight. But I don't think there's no amount of money that's going to be enough to allow you to be that embarrassed, right? So of course that's the sad part of it. That's all kind of ended it. But Jesus Christ, man, like, these YouTube fights are hilarious. I want to hopefully see Jake obviously fight somebody with a little bit more skill. I think that would make it far more interesting. I think that's what made the whole like Logan Paul and KSI thing a lot more interesting as a spectacle to kind of watch, because they were both sort of like on the same sort of level in terms of skill. It made it a very intriguing fight, of course, because of their backstory and, you know, the feuds that they have online and the fact that they don't like each other, blah blah blah. But in terms of skill level, that's what you kind of want to see. You don't really want to see somebody who can fight and doesn't know how to fight, because then it just turns into those weird Russian fight video things that you see online and stuff, right? Where we saw it recently, that guy that weighs like 400 pounds fighting some, you know, mixed martial arts professional, right? Even she's semi-professional. The fact that they put, I don't know, they've managed to make it a spectacle, but the woman's always going to win. Doesn't matter if the guy's 500 pounds. If you can't fight, it's no use his size. So that was quite disappointing to see. And of course, to put the cherry on top of the cake, we have this article here that says from Brobab, where it says you can now buy weed in bags featuring a picture of the unconscious Nate Robinson if you want to get KO'd in a more enjoyable way. Like, again, I would love to know, some of my American fans, like, what is the deal with Nate Robinson? Why are people going so hard on him, like, for losing? I guess I know the knockout was bad, but why are people really laughing and gleefully kind of mocking his inability to fight in a boxing ring? Like, what's the deal? Was he just not a likable guy? Is it because he just didn't beat the guy everyone hates? Like, what is the deal? Let me know, man. Why are people going in on Nate Robinson so hard? This is absolutely insane, man. Someone with a video of the packaging, obviously playing "I Want to Knock You Out" by, what is it, Public Enemy? Look at that, loads of packets of weed with Nate Robinson's face completely flatlined on the canvas out there. Again, unfair. Oh, there's a picture here, of course, of Jake Paul kind of posing with his jersey after the fact, but Jesus Christ, people are brutal on the internet. And I guess, you know, he's gonna have to ride this one out. I think if he would have won I think he has to accept it, right? Because if he would have won, he would have been gloating, he would have been all over the place, he would have been getting interviewed at every radio station, he would have been partying too, the same way that Jake Paul's partying. So you can't really, you know, you can't be too angry at people dancing on your grave at the moment. But I'd love to know why people seem to be extra happy that he lost. Is, you know, I'd love to know the backstory behind that. But again, hopefully he's all right. I think he is. He made a statement recently saying, "Hey, I'm cool." So Nate Robinson, get well soon. You know, these things happen. You tried to get in a ring, it didn't work out. What can you do?